That was brisk. You know, I'm Dorothy Wilhelm, in case you wondered, and this is Swimming Upstream, Generation Gap. Now, we have a special surprise for you today. I know I'm surprised. Uh, one of our very treasured newcomers to the show, Jason Falls. Come out, Jason. You don't have to, don't lurk. Anyway, the Ray, our usual Generation Gap master, was called away unexpectedly. Heaven knows I didn't expect it. And so Jason, our new producer, whom we already love and revere quite a lot. I mean, I don't want to get sticky about it, but so, anyway, this is this month's show, Generation Gap. We always start with, Jason, do you know what generation you belong to?
I am Gen X.
I thought you were. I think I wrote that down. I'm not sure. Yeah. And what does that mean? What are the characteristics of your generation? And do you adhere to them?
Well, I definitely adhere to them. And I think the general characterization of our generation is, we were latchkey kids. Our parents didn't let us come in the house until dinner time. We could drop off our book bags on the porch after school, and then we were told to go away. So we kind of raised ourselves in a lot of ways. Our parents were either boomers or maybe part of the hippie generation. And so there was a little less parental oversight for my generation. So we grew up with an attitude compared to the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas and whatnot of today, and even compared to, some of the older generations as well. Our attitude is always, get out of my way, get out of my face. Don't tell me what to do. Leave me alone.
You know how many times you said, I don't care, since you came in this morning?
I've been trying to temper that and say, instead of I don't care, I don't mind, because I do care, but I don't mind what decision you make. So
I think that's good. And it is a delineation. Now, I am, of course, part of the silent generation. I missed the greatest generation by about 15 years, I think. People always ask me. But no, we were silent. And everyone says, falling on the floor and laughing, you've never been silent a minute in your life. And it's true. But we were called the silent generation because we didn't make waves. We followed the rules.
Yeah.
And because we came right, during World War II. Mm-hmm. And this was still a time, since you couldn't be there for it, that we were, proud to be Americans, and that's why, as we wanted to talk about the 4th of July for this show, we learned in school, and we had parades, and not parades like the parade last week, but real parades and all kinds of things. So we thought that maybe today, for the fun of it, we would talk about fireworks, and maybe even illegal fireworks. Now, what's the difference in generations for Jason between you and me? What were fireworks like? And by the way, I have to tell you, you guys were not the only ones who's, when we were little, our parents, if we didn't have work to do, and usually you had the woodshed. From the time I was 5, my daddy, when he went to work in the morning, he worked on the railroad. He would make a mark on the wall in the woodshed, and we did have a woodshed. And I was 5 years old, and I had to pile wood up to that mark. But then after that, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted, but you couldn't go back in the house. And in a lot of ways, I don't know how you feel about it, of course, but in a lot of ways, I feel like it was probably a good thing, because we learned to be self-reliant, and we learned not to expect somebody else to make our fun for us and all that.
I definitely can appreciate that about the silent generation. And I think there's a lot of parallels to Gen X. And I think the younger generations today, this is my opinion, I'm not an expert, but because Gen X, my generation, was much, more left to themselves and probably had some sort of friction or distance with their parents, they became a little bit more overbearing as parents themselves. So like my children are have very much been catered to. And of course, the era starting in the probably mid 1990s going forward, there was this era of, oh, everybody gets a 12th place ribbon. Everybody
Yeah.
participation trophy. When I was a kid, if you lost, you lost.
Yes.
You that's it. You just learned how to deal with it.
And I think that's a terrible mistake, personally.
Sure.
It's not a fire. Not your terrible mistake. Theirs. I don't think, because the kids know the difference. They know that everybody got an award. They know and how you learn things is you learn what works and what doesn't.
Right.
So unfortunately, what's happened is there are a lot of people that are very, very concerned about their future. They don't know how to grab one thing and then the other,
Right.
Which is what you have to do. And all of that, what you may ask, does that have to do with the 4th of July? Tell me about your 4th of July when you were a boy. You were a boy.
So the big differences, I think of how I experienced 4th of July today and then how I did as a child. And as a child, it was, there was typically, a weekend. If the 4th didn't fall on a weekend, everybody took a day off of work, and it happened during the week. But I typically remember weekends, and you had a cookout, and you ate hot dogs, and you lit sparklers during the day. And then you all went to one place. I grew up in a small town in Eastern Kentucky. So we went downtown, and there was an overlook up on the mountain overlooking my town, and they shot the fireworks off there. There was one fireworks show that everybody came to, and it lasted about 30 minutes. And there was a grand finale, and then you all went home. And that was a very different experience than what we have today, because now I think 14 of my neighbors have full-on fireworks productions in my neighborhood. And there's a big one in downtown. I live in Louisville now, which is a lot larger city. So there's a big one displayed downtown, but there's several other small ones around the city. And then so many people are shooting off fireworks in their yards and on their streets, some legal, some illegal. And so it's just, it's a much bigger holiday in terms of celebrations. And there's a lot more pockets of people doing their own thing, as opposed to everybody coming together as one community to one event and doing something. So I think it's just sort of become scattered and a little bit more small celebrations versus one big one.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And we had the same experience. Now, we were stationed down at Fort Campbell. And so, there was also the event on post. Same up here. We're just down the road from Fort Lewis. But of course, I think in a way, Army posts, we expect that.
Mm-hmm.
The Marines, my dear. They have,
yeah.
But remember, this is just now. See, this is where I slip in my historical knowledge. Are you ready for the slip?
I'm ready.
Now the display of pyrotechnics has always been a big part of Independence Day. And founding father John Adams saw it coming. I have this from PBS News, so you know. Commemoration of America's independence, he said, ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes, game, that's SHEWS shows, is what we'd say, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forevermore. Adams wrote in a letter to his wife, Abigail, nice. On July 3rd, which he thought was going to be the day, 1776. Now here, I live in an assisted living community, and someday I'm going to take a whole show to complain about it. It's a nice place, but I want this getting old stopped immediately. No, I don't, I guess. Anyway, they have around a very large green, like a parade field, different events, and you're talking about that, but things to eat, or fireworks or something. So you can actually walk through it, but you're all in the same place. So that kind of I think is a happy solution, because some people then are, in wheelchairs or whatever, and still they can go and enjoy everything.
Yeah.
But now let's get down to the fireworks. What kind of fireworks did you personally have?
Well, I was always fast. I was always a big Matchbox car collector. And
Well,
so I
yes.
would get firecrackers and M80s and I would try to blow my cars up. Because
Well,
back then Matchbox cars were made out of steel and they
yes.
did not bend and you could not destroy them. And so the best you could hope for is you could rip the tires off of them. But yeah, my friends and I used to put firecrackers in the windows of our little Matchbox cars and see how many it would take to blow the roof off the thing. And there were bottle rockets, of course. And then, of course, I grew up in a rural part of the country where sometimes people aren't always bright about how they celebrate. And so we would have people that would actually light bottle rockets and shoot them at each other, which is not safe and not recommended, but that happened a few times. But I was never running with a crowd that did a lot of crazy illegal fireworks, like big ones. But I think M80s were not allowed in the state of Kentucky at the time. I think those were illegal. So when we would get a hold of a box of those, it was a big deal. And we would bury them in the yard and try to blow, holes in the yard and things like that. But big scale fireworks were always reserved for, the big production at night in downtown that was run by the fire department. And so we knew we were going to be safe from those. I don't think that's true today. I think there's a lot of people out there who, in Kentucky, you got to go across the line to Tennessee to get your illegal fireworks because Kentucky's got a stranglehold on that. But
I remember.
man, our neighbors, they started last weekend shooting off fireworks for 4th of July, and they'll go through July 15th. That's another big change. Like when I was a kid, you didn't hear fireworks until the 3rd,
Right.
and you didn't hear them after the 5th. And now you start hearing them 2 weeks out and you hear them halfway through the month of July before people stop. And which, with people who have PTSD or have dogs or whatnot, that can be an absolute terror. But that's, again, something people didn't care about or didn't watch out for when I was a kid.
Right. Did you carry around those little firecrackers in your pocket just in case?
Yeah, whippersnappers. Yeah, we would throw little whippersnappers, little pop, things that popped. We would throw those at each other because those didn't hurt. Those were just sort of a compression thing. But I had a friend of mine who had a little bit of a hand injury one time because of a firecracker going off in his hand. He didn't lose a finger or anything, but he got hurt. But I don't remember a whole lot of other, bad injuries. We didn't have a lot of, crazy stuff when I was growing up.
Now we did, and I have to, I shouldn't laugh but a young man, football player and all, named Mickey Rizzuto, I remember the Mick, and he was decided to cut a dynamite cap with a pair of scissors.
Ooh.
That was a real mistake.
Yeah.
And as Mick is quoted as saying, "Would you look at all that hamburger?"
Oh, no.
And that is my big memory of that. And he lost several fingers there.
Yeah.
So he didn't play football anymore either. But that was, and it was, I think the reason that we have much more restricted rules today is precisely because those things did happen.
Sure.
Now, I think we had a lot of fun. And we also did have the wonderful exhibit, the wonderful fireworks display at Natatorium Park in Spokane, which was, in those days, people swam at natatoriums. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
If you didn't have a natatorium, you were not swimming.
We couldn't pronounce natatorium in Kentucky, I'm sure.
You're not kidding. I've lived in Kentucky. Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
That's okay.
So anyway, I've got to tell you, and I guess we've learned as the years have gone by, and then you wonder, when you hear what John Adams said, it's just so different and so hard to combine the two things. And so I don't mean combine, you know what word I mean. What is it? It's hard to
compare.
Yes, because now when we lived in Taiwan, this is awful, and I'm ashamed to admit it. But when we lived in Taiwan, and we had lots of fireworks, of course, China. China's where fireworks fascinated. So one 4th of July that we were there, we blew up this farmer's farm, which I find no way that Hands Across the Sea or any other thing could possibly justify that. However, he was very nice about it. We were amazed. I felt so bad, and my husband did it. I didn't do it, but we were surprisingly happy to be able to find him, because of course we couldn't talk to him, but he knew this is the thing, that if the Americans were to damage any part of your property, they would repair it.
Yeah.
And so in actual fact, this is a case where he actually ended up with a much nicer farm than he had. But that, the frank fact is, we're members of the silent generation. That shouldn't have happened. So anyway, I have really mixed feelings about 4th of July now. I watch on the television the PBS, Capitol 4th, is that it?
Yep.
And then I say, look at those kids. Now, after my, do you have any terrible thing you did that will kind of compensate for what I did there?
Well, yeah, I can probably relate a little bit. It's probably not as full scale as someone's entire farm, but I was setting firecrackers on a little walking bridge that went to a water treatment tower on the river in my hometown. And down below was the riverbank, and the riverbank was, covered with kudzu and weeds and all this kind of stuff. And so my friend Patrick and I were setting off fireworks and just throwing them out, across toward the river and setting them off to just make noise. Well, a few minutes go by, we've set off a pack or two of fireworks, and all of a sudden this plume of smoke comes up. And I look down, and we have set the riverbank on fire.
Oh my.
And so there's probably about a 15 or 20 foot circle of, weed and kudzu that has started to burn because one of the fireworks ignited the dead, plants below us. And so the only thing I remember about that is Patrick took off running, like he went home. He was scared. And I ran down and climbed down the riverbank and tried to stomp the fire out. And it stomped it out enough that it didn't spread. Like, it eventually went out and it didn't hurt anything. So it didn't damage anything, but we almost did. And I still to this day hold that against Patrick for leaving me there with that mess.
Well, my big illegal fireworks experience was after my husband died in 1981. I am terminally unattractive and thus have not remarried. I'm just saying. Anyway, we found in his shop, he had a hobby shop. He built planes and things, a huge footlocker stuffed with illegal fireworks.
Wow.
I mean, stuffed. And of course, he did love fireworks. I knew that. But now, here we are. Have you ever tried to get rid of it? A footlocker were full of illegal fireworks?
I don't think I've ever tried to get rid of a footlocker, much less one full of fireworks.
Well, it was just terrible, because you would think, well, you would just take it to the police. Well, actually, it turns out not to be that. You see,
Yeah.
It turns out not to be that simple. And we had a terrible time. We had the boys. But now remember, here's why. We always had to be so careful. We couldn't, I'm sure ordinary people, did you notice that? Ordinary people could probably maybe drag it, although it was too heavy to drag to the police station. But you see, two of our boys were, one at Annapolis and one at the Coast Guard Academy. Now, believe me, when you are at Annapolis or the Coast Guard Academy or West Point, you are not doing any little thing that even might be considered illegal. And they finally got to where they were stuffing the fireworks in the fronts. Now, I don't think this would have helped in the fronts of their jersey and taking them out. Now, they swore to me, and this would be almost 50 years ago. They swore to me that they weren't really shooting them off and enjoying them. But okay. I believe so. So, Jason, my dear, what I think that I've learned from this, it doesn't sound to me like the 4th is very different for either of us. And we need to be careful, so because we need our lovely hands for our, our work here.
Yes.
And we hope, and well, this has been a lot of fun, by the way. We hope Ray will be here next month again.
Yep.
And so, there any last inspirational or cautionary words you would like to?
I would just encourage people to, be sensible and maintain some degree of safety if you are going to shoot off fireworks. Or the other option is to be like me and don't ever put your hands on them. Let somebody else do it and just sit back and enjoy.
Look at all that hamburger. So this is fun. This has been Jason Falls and Dorothy Wilhelm, and always saving a place for Ray Miller still. Generation gap, and we're here each month trying to explain why we don't even speak the same language, is what I think it is. Now, we are produced by Falls and Partners, but this is an SOB production. SOB stands for Spunky Old Broads. Wait a minute. The very belated Ray Miller still is here, and I'll tell you the truth, we have never done Generation Gap without him. I don't see how we could do it now. Ray, where the hell have you been?
It was a very busy morning today here in Enumclaw. Got a lot of stuff going on.
I'm in Enumclaw. Enumclaw. Gotta say, we missed you, and you've never missed a show before.
I have never. I know this is. It's a shock to the system. I'll tell you that much.
But Jason and I kind of pulled ourselves together, and after weeping copiously into our sleeves, what we did, we talked about, now tell what generation you belong to.
Millennials, which means that we tend to not like fireworks.
Why is that, do you think?
And you know what? That's just my own personal opinion, but I think that we're a generation that has decided that it's much better to respect the general community than it is to have a big show. Now, that's not to mean that I should say that we don't dislike fireworks, but that means like we might do something a little shorter during the day, or not super late at night. We're not going to, I don't think our generation will go out and actually have that big at midnight show, make it last until 2 a.m. We don't have the mortars, so just do something small for the entire family and call it good. And then maybe go watch our own show or do anything else.
Well, and you you learned this because of a personal experience, I believe.
Oh, it's always been kind of a thing down here. Enumclaw is a senior community. Given that we're pretty right wing over here, I think a lot of vets have come down here to retire. So every year, there's always kind of like a, hey, remember, seniors are here. Hey, remember, my husband is a vet and he has PTSD and he's also wheelchair bound. And the 4th of July is literally the worst holiday for him. Everyone calls in about, I get letters about pets. My pets don't like it. I don't want to have to drug my pet. Can you please keep it down? And then every 4th of July, we hear fireworks shows go on for 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes, and I'm thinking, man, you have that sort of disposable cash. That's nuts. How do you have that much money for fireworks? That doesn't make any sense to me. But I am personally at least someone who just says, all right, let's just grab a couple of sparklers, let's a couple of things that spin on the ground and call it good. And
you set the street on fire one time, though.
Yes, that was a new ban in Kirkland, and I just was not interested in not having something lit on fire. So I went into my friend's garage, found a liquid that was probably pretty flammable, and I told everyone, all right, everyone, here's some chalk. Go make some cool designs out on the sidewalk. And then after they were done, I put all the liquid all around the design. So there was like a spiral, a couple birds, and then I just lit it on fire, and poof, off it goes. That was pretty cool. So I wasn't blowing anything up.
There you go.
Yeah,
you got to get creative sometimes.
You do have to, and that's what we've done today. I'm so glad you actually. Is there any bit of advice or anything that you wanted? I'm sitting up tall. You see, is there any advice you wanted to give our audience members today before we move on?
Well, I think a lot of people might kind of wonder, folks who listen that aren't Americans might wonder why this date is so special. We are a fairly patriotic country. Even on my street alone, you can see 4 or 5 American flags, which I personally find a little creepy. But that's also just me. But if anything, like a lot of people say that the 4th of July is about American independence and we overthrew tyranny and now we get to blow stuff up because of it. But I would assert that the 4th of July is actually about community and about, we were able to be independent and form our own community. It's that second part of independence is now we can do our own thing as our own country, as our own community. So when it comes to celebrating the 4th of July, just keep that in mind, that this is not just about your independence. That's a short-sighted way to look at the 4th of July. This is all of our ability to celebrate the kind of people and the kind of community that we are able to have. So, just be a little conscientious of how you celebrate.
Okay, that was very inspiring. And now, thank you for joining us. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad you got here. Now, next we'll see you again in August. Both of you, actually. I hope.
Yeah.
So what, Ray? Because you're.
Wait, no, whoa, July. What about July?
Oh, this is July, honey.
No, this is June. Or this is the July show.
That's how that works.
Yeah, there we go.
We publish a month ahead, huh? So you get to choose. What will our topic be next month?
Ooh, I don't know. For August?
Yeah.
I'm going to look at my calendar here. What is happening in August? I like fitness.
You don't. What do you think, Jason?
I like
fitness. So, how do we in different generations stay fit?
I like that. That's good. Can we do that? Is that okay with you?
It's fine with me. I'm not real qualified to talk about fitness other than fitness pizza in my mouth, but we'll give it a shot.
No, but I mean, that's good. We don't want everybody to be the same. That would be no good.
Jason, are you also on the seafood diet?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Do we need to explain that one to you, Dorothy?
I can hardly know.
No, okay.
I eat everything I see. That's the seafood diet. There you go.
I didn't know that. Well, Ray, you certainly brighten things up. And so we will see you guys next, it'll be next month.
Yes.
And to talk about fitness. For 92 and 6 kids, this is not bad. Okay, thank you so much, Jason, Ray, Dorothy. Going home. Bye-bye.